He was the brunt of jokes all week and the #1 water cooler discussion. That would be the Google employee fired for his internal memo. But was the coverage about what he said accurate? James Damore is the author of this internal memo titled Google's Ideological Echo Chamber, where he makes the argument that the reason Google has so few female engineers is biological.
This has links to prenatal testosterone. And that explains a lot of the differences in career choice. For example, teacher versus something like coding.
Damore cites scholarly research and uses charts and graphs to back his argument. But when the geek website Motherboard broke the story, they called it an anti-diversity screed, a term widely picked up.
We begin this afternoon with more fallout from the anti-diversity memo at Google.
But when the dust had settled, some nuanced reporting emerged. Writing for The Atlantic, Connor Friedersdorf said, the many characterizations of the memo as anti-diversity are inaccurate. But maybe it's hard to mischaracterize other Damore musings, like this.
Men have a higher drive for status, and women on average have more neuroticism.
Female neuroticism. I'll bet Alex Jones has an elixir for that.
Secure your Brain Force Plus today.
All right, so I have to say, when I first read this, it was earlier in the week, and I was getting a very, very boiled-down Reader's Digest version of it, and it was just stunning. It was mind-numbing. I mean, how can anybody come up with that? And it wasn't until a couple days later, when we were actually started having a discussion, that I took a look at that thing for myself. I can't call it anti-diversity. I mean, obviously the guy's coming from a particular point of view, a more conservative point of view, but he was actually describing a culture that exists really in corporate America in general. Right. And, I mean, he was being critical of the way people are going about selecting diverse. I don't even like using that term. You know, even using the term diverse candidate. I mean, that's what he was really railing about. Right. And that was the main thing was, and he actually came up with some solutions. So I thought the media's coverage of it was kind of biased, frankly.
Right. And I think if you read the entire memo, he talks about how he does value diversity. And, this is a trap I think that we all fall into as journalists sometimes in an effort to sort of capture the essence of a story and make it attractive to people. There are these tags that are put, and it's very easy and comfortable to just fall into this trap. And the problem with that is that oftentimes now when these stories are written, they're shared across social media, and people just look at what it says and just reshare it, right? And then that becomes the narrative, and I think it's flawed. Was he inarticulate? Are some of his conclusions off? Yes, but I think there's a lot of substance to what he's talking about. And as you pointed out, he is offering solutions and making a case, albeit not entirely correct.
Well, I'm 100% happy to call it an anti-diversity manifesto because that's exactly what it was, I thought. This was very much of a piece of the same sort of discussions that we've had around people who are trying to justify racism through pointing to isolated scientific cases. I'm thinking of the Charles Murray debates in the 1910, the bell curve. What was remarkable, there are a whole lot of terrible, wrong things about this memo. One of them was the entire focus of his allegedly scientific citations and the argument he was building were about women. But he also says, and we should also get rid of all the race programs too. I wonder how we would have been thinking about this differently if it was in fact saying, well, this proves that Hispanics are genetically predisposed to certain kinds of jobs. Yeah, but he was explaining
why 80% of the workforce in the engineering department is male. That's why he was focusing on women.
But he also, in that same memo, said we should eliminate all race-based diversity programs at Google as well. Look, imagine if this was 1950, and he was writing a piece saying, why aren't women in the workforce? Only 20% of women are in the workforce. Why is that? Well, obviously it's because their genetic disposition, they just have this attachment to motherhood, they all want to be at home. And now fast forward, 50, 70 years, you're at a point where that's more than triple the presence of women in the workforce. To say that it's a biological argument is just dumb.
I want to even it up and say that I totally agree with Josh. I mean, the argument that Connor Friedersdorf made in The Atlantic was, well, you can't say it was an anti-diversity screed because he professed his support for diversity and said, well, maybe we're just going about it the wrong way. But the professions of support in this memo for diversity did not ring true at all. I mean, he clearly thinks, at least to my reading, they didn't ring true. They felt like something he was saying in an effort to cover his butt and not lose his job. He clearly thinks that, on average, women are more empathetic, less inclined to build systems, less ambitious. He even floated out the bell curve, to your point about this being Charles Murray-esque. He used 2 bell curves to say, well, don't get upset with me. I'm not saying that all women are like this, but most women are like this. So if you question the way a more diverse workforce is being cultivated, if you question protocols and policies inside a company that are supposed to make people who aren't white men feel comfortable, I don't know. I'm with Josh.
All right, you want to break the tie here, Dan?
Well, I didn't find it offensive so much as I found it weird and tedious. Right. It was not a well-written memo, that's for sure. I think it was anti-diversity in part, but I can see why he himself thinks it was not anti-diversity. A couple of things. People might be wondering, why did Google feel that they needed to take the extreme step of firing an engineer, because you kind of pictured them in their cubicle doing their engineering stuff. Yeah. It doesn't really bother anybody. Google has a workplace culture of peer reviews, so he would be in a position of sitting in on a peer review of female employees, and so that was really kind of untenable. And another thing that we're seeing happening now, and invariably whenever the media spotlight shines on some unknown person, we see this happening. He had listed on his LinkedIn profile that he has a PhD from Harvard. That's disappeared. Oh. And Wired magazine looked into it, and Harvard has said he does not, in fact, have a PhD.
Yeah, well, I did take exception to the neuroticism. That's the only part there. More women, and I said, I don't know any women that are neurotic.
I did, too.
All the people that I know are guys.
I'm as neurotic as anybody.
Exactly.
And I'm right there with you. One interesting piece of data that I saw unveiled in the back and forth over this, and maybe someone here can remind me who posted this, because I can't remember who it was, but I saw a graph of the representation of women in different professions, including computer science. And it was tacking up and up and up in computer science and other professions. And then right around 1985, all of a sudden, the number of women involved in this area, broadly speaking, plummeted. And that's something that obviously raises huge questions that he didn't get into.
Well, Julian Assange wants to hire him, so he's all set.
If Julian Assange is with him, then he can't be right.
All right.